Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this GAIA webinar on soil and agronomy data sharing perspectives, lessons learned from Ethiopia and Rwanda. All of you who are in this meeting and maybe some who will share with don't know a lot about GAIA. The Guiding Acid Soil Management Investments in Africa project is looking to understand and communicate the differences in types of soil acidity and how to correct them in a cost-effective manner. So GAIA is looking to make recommendations for the right kind of investments for both public and private sector. And to do this, GAIA needs to fill gaps in existing data and develop new insights. And for this to happen, we need effective data sharing within the project. So we've invited you to this webinar for us to discuss, data sharing best practices, what we've learned from our experience working in Ethiopia and working in Rwanda, and how we see it, what we think we can contribute to the GAIA project in Tanzania. So we've invited colleagues to share their experiences working with CABI, developing soil information services, and just generally promoting an enabling environment for data sharing. So for today's webinar, we were going to have Christian Witt, who was going to open with the recording, but we didn't manage to get that recording. So we're going to have Fred, project lead for GAIA, do the opening for us. And then we're going to have Henry from CABI, who's going to give us some insights on the work that CABI's been doing in this space, what lessons we've learned as CABI, and then we'll give a chance to our colleagues. We've got Lulseged from Alliance Bioversity-CIAT, and we've got Rhys from IITA representing RASIS. So just a little bit of housekeeping as usual. If you could just keep your microphone on mute, that would be great until we open the floor for question and answer. But while presenters are presenting, we welcome you to use the chat function to send any questions that you might have. And like I said, this call will be recorded and we'll share it out, and we will allow all those who couldn't join to watch it and contact us for any questions afterwards. So yeah, so I think that's it for the intro. I'm going to ask you, Henry, to come. He's a digital development manager within CABI. His background is in telecommunications and engineering, and at CABI he oversees the data-driven development work, which involves providing innovative solutions, managing knowledge portals that bring agricultural knowledge to smallholders in Africa. So Henry, you can share your screen. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Chipo. Oh my goodness. My video is, I think there's a problem with my connection. Do you need me to present?
Yeah, I wanted you to share your screen.
Okay.
Let's try again, and if that doesn't work, then maybe either Chipo or Mike can do it from their end.
Do we have it? Just a second.
Yeah, I can see your screen now, Henry. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I thought my video affected the screen sharing. Yeah, I was about to call the IT team. Okay, good. Yeah. So basically, what I would like to present in this session is to talk about the enabling data access, the lessons which we have learned from the projects which we have conducted, the enabling data access and soil information system projects, which we have done in Ethiopia, Rwanda, and GAIA project in Tanzania, including others in India. And my presentation will talk about roughly just introduce CABI, and then mention the role which we play in those projects, and then go dive into the approach which we use, including the FAIR principles. I'll introduce the FAIR principles, and then give an overview of the data sharing enabling environment, and finish by talking about the lessons. I know most of you know what CABI do, but just as a brief intro, we are an intergovernmental organization, and we are owned by 50 member countries, which guide and influence our core areas of work. Particular focus of our work is alleviating poverty and improving food security by increasing crop yield through research and international development. We have close to 500, I think, plus staff operating in 20 locations worldwide. These are our areas of work in terms of what we do, and we deliver our work around 4 major themes via strategic partnership, alliances, and linkages. The themes are organized in 4. We have value chain and trade, where we package or deliver climate smart good agricultural practices to farmers to help them improve food security. We have an invasive theme, which majorly deal in plant health problems by controlling pests and disease and combating threats. We have another theme on development, communication, and extension, where we package information or translate the science from the lab and deliver information to farmers so that they can increase their yield and grow more crops. The digital development theme, which our data work for, involve the creation of knowledge portals as well as applications or services which bring critical knowledge to farmers. And mostly we offer high impact services that strengthen policy and practice for data management sharing. Within the digital development theme, we have a sub-theme, the data policy and practice, where the projects under enabling data access fall along. We also help clients or partners to improve their data management and data sharing practices and support them to adhere fair, that is where the data is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable data principles. I'll be talking or introducing the fair data principles at a later stage. These are the projects which we have done under the enabling data access and soil information system projects within Rwanda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, and India. So we've been involved since 2018. We've worked with the Gates Foundation on these projects on several soil information system investments in Ethiopia, Tanzania, Rwanda, and India, where we support grantees to overcome specific data sharing challenges. And we have had, there's been growing interest from the Gates Foundation to work with CABI and other partners to implement the fair data principles on the projects. And our role within the GAIA project, Guiding Acidic Soil Management Investment in Africa, is on data management aspect, where we facilitate and support the flow of data within the GAIA project, and also supporting a strategy towards sustainable flow and access of the outputs of GAIA. Just to give an overview in terms of the role which we play, our major role starts with understanding data flows among the stakeholders. What I mean by this, we do sort of like a landscape analysis where we understand who has data, how do they collect data, how do they share data, and also aim to find cultural or challenges that relates to cultural, technical, or barriers that affect the sharing and accessing of data, especially the soil and agronomy data. After mapping or understanding those challenges, we now identify opportunities and go ahead to develop guidelines and recommendations on how to manage the soil and agronomy data within the countries where the project or the grant is being implemented. We also develop guidelines on data sharing best practices. And for Ethiopia, we are in the process of support. We already have supported and developed the necessary infrastructure to build fair data principles within the Rwandas project. And for Ethiopia, we have created a soil and agronomy data sharing policy, which is structured around the fair principles. And these implemented or helped to create a framework for data sharing. We have also worked with, within these projects, our main role also is to work with grantees to support fair data implementation. And as I mentioned, I'll be talking about FAIR. In terms of identifying risk to sustainability, majorly we do that through user needs analysis and market research needs. Our approach to enabling data access starts first with the people, not the technology. You find that most of the technology solutions are necessary and beneficial, but how they are designed limits their impact. That's why sometimes these technologies they tend not to focus on people who are meant to benefit from them. And that's why the approach which we take first is knowing the people starting, we put people at the top level. Another approach which we used is a human-centered design approach in our work, where we work to understand the challenges faced by those who we are working with within the soil and agronomy field. And you know, the best way to understand people is by meeting them, where you immerse yourself in the life of those people so that you can understand their challenges. We also identify constraints and opportunities through landscape consultation. And this helps to construct the flow of data. We do a mapping. We understand who generates data, how do they share them, which platforms are they using, who are the decision makers. So sort of like understanding, this gives us the understanding of the constraints and opportunities. We support the development of the enabling environment. And what I mean by this is in terms of the policies, practices, technology, and infrastructure, including the mindset, the attitudes that interventions operate within. Then lastly, focusing on the non-tech elements, it goes with the people first, where you can focus on technology elements, but fail to focus on the key people in country that need to be engaged so that you can establish sustainability of the investment. Now, moving into the fair data principles, just to give a summary or a highlight of what are these fair data principles, which I kept mentioning. And these are principles which were developed by the Dutch Tech Center for Life Sciences, and they are a set of guiding principles that state that data must be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. It provides a guidance for scientific data management. And as you can see, the names in terms of how data is findable, what it means, the first step for researchers or anyone who want to access data is to finding where the data are. Metadata and data, for example, should be easily findable both by humans and computers. Just to give an example, you find that stakeholders can have difficulty in identifying or sourcing the data which they want, which they didn't produce. Even sharing or accessing the data from partners becomes a challenge. In terms of accessing the accessible, the data, once the users find that they require data, they need to access them so that they can use this data. Then for interoperability, it implies that the data needs to be integrated with other data or other applications, so that this data can be used to make decisions. And lastly, in this slide, research data should be ready for future research and future processing, because the ultimate goal of FAIR is to optimize reuse of the data. And why is achieving FAIR data important to projects or grants? It means that when you apply the principles, the FAIR principles to data, you enable more collection, storing, and sharing of data. This is just to give an example how the principles benefit the researchers. Findable, it enables the researchers to know the data that they want, if they exist, or for example, if they want to collect them. The GAIA project, for example, there are those data which exist, but there are those data which needs to be collected. And talking to stakeholders or the partners allows you to know the data which are available or that needs to be collected. Accessible allows people to know whether they can retrieve the data for use for other things if they want to. And interoperable means that it makes it easy for people to bring data together with other data so they can gain insights. Reusable will help people to know that they cannot, what they can do and cannot do with the data. Supporting FAIR data and content. In this slide, I would like to talk about the PPT framework, where there are three elements: people, process, and technology. To deliver FAIR data, all the three elements should be in place or interact. The right people should be identified and equipped with knowledge to manage data. Same apply to processes in terms of rules, policy, and guidelines, which makes it more efficient to manage data, including the right technology, which helps people to manage data. And a good way to take this concept, the people, process, and technology, is an example of using that example of a three-legged stool or table. If one leg is short or the other one is longer, the table will not balance. Similarly, the technology, if the technology changes, you will need to modify people and processes so that you can adapt the new tools. And if any of the three elements is missing, it means that you are likely not to achieve the positive impact of the results. Now, this is my last slides, which I would now like to go and briefly talk about the lessons learned or reflections in terms of the enabling data access to soil information. Based on our previous activities which we have done on the projects we have done in Ethiopia and Rwanda, we have determined 7 common factors for success. And the first one is when there's that clear problem that the grant is trying to address, there will be success to the project. And what I mean by this is that the problem should be expressed by stakeholders in country. And the way the grant will address that problem will need to be understood by all the stakeholders. Let me give an example of relating to GAIA. The problem is that the response to soil acidity is the application of a blanket approach. And the aim, GAIA aim to understand and communicate the different in types of soil acidity and how to correct them in a cost-effective manner. If that problem is understood and the grant addresses that problem in a manner which is understood by all the stakeholders, then there will be success within the project. The second one is the in-country benefits are tangible. When the problem is clear, the solution to benefit in-country stakeholders should also be clear and valued by the stakeholders. GAIA is producing a range of adapted knowledge products that can benefit farmers. We have the lime industry, government, including other stakeholders, to make appropriate decisions and interventions. So there should be tangible benefits, and the stakeholders should see the value. There should also be champions for the solutions, and the champions will steer the sustainability of the investment. When you have all the when you have champions within the project, those are the ones who will steer sustainability of the project. Assumptions should be transparent, meaning that all the stakeholders do have assumptions when going to the project. But if the assumptions are transparent, the progress will increase. And the assumptions should be managed through the grants and partners who are involved. Sustainability is built into the approach. This is a long-term deliverable, and it requires in-country engagement. And based on our past experience, sustainability should always start from the beginning when the project starts, and all the stakeholders should participate in sustainability, so that the sustainability of the project is achieved when the project comes to an end. Communication among partners is key, and partners should understand their roles and what each other are doing, and what the other partners are doing within the project. It needs to be clear so that communication can become easy between the partners. The grant considers adjacent activities in country. What else is happening in country that the grant can leverage to avoid stakeholders fatigue? Imagine a scenario where there are 1 or 2, 5 same projects and targeting the same stakeholders. So there is that need to understand or leverage other projects to avoid fatigue. It is also important to utilize in-country support, the use of consultants and partners to develop and keep momentum of the project. For example, on the GAIA project, we are working with DLAB, who are conducting the stakeholder interviews and leveraging their support or expertise in terms of them providing us support when they are in country. Yes, that was my last slide. And if you have questions, you can post on the chat, or follow-up questions, you can send it to Chipo or I. Thank you.
Thanks, Henry. We'll actually have some time for Q&A after the presentations. Fred, can I come to you to give us a short 5 minutes talk on the project? I'm sorry, I meant for you to start before Henry. So yeah, but thanks, Henry. That was very, very informative.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me? My network is poor, sorry.
Do you want to turn off your video maybe?
Can you hear me? Yeah, I think we're going to have a storm. You probably have the same your side, no, Chipo?
We can hear you,
Yes.
I think.
Okay. So yeah, I prepared some remarks to follow on the remarks from Christian, but let me go ahead with my remarks. What I just want to say is that the way we conduct agronomy research has changed significantly since I started my career 20 years ago. You really have to demonstrate the novelty of your research, of the research you intend to conduct these days. Statements like, this was never research in this particular village don't work anymore. So you must demonstrate clearly how your research builds on existing knowledge and fills gap in data nationally and more globally. You can no longer also conduct your research in a few farms selected in an ad hoc manner. You must have a clear definition of your target area and how representative it is of soils, agroecology, farming systems, etc. in the country or even the continent or the globe. You increasingly have to use spatially representative sampling frames to select locations where your trials will yield the most insights for your resources, for the resources invested. You're also expected to demonstrate efficiency in the way you collect your data and make use of technology that offer the best compromises in terms of speed, cost, and accuracy. And finally, you are no longer expected to only generate scientific articles. You are also expected to ensure that your findings are translated into products and services usable by private sector, by governments and development partners, and linked to impact at scale. So basically all this new thing, this new way of conducting agronomy research is sometimes called agronomy to scale. And what is central to it is really data. So you must access data to identify gaps and build on existing knowledge. You must be as efficient as possible in your data collection in terms of time, in terms of funding, etc. And you must ensure that you can access and make use of your data. So GAIA, the I'm leading from the CIMMYT side, the guiding acid soil management investments in Africa, has really been designed as an agronomy to scale project, and data is absolutely central to the project. So the success of GAIA will depend on whether or not it's able to access existing data in order to increase the depth and the utility of this data, exchange data amongst its partners, and value and translate it into products that can be useful for governments, the private sector, and farmers. So really data is absolutely central, and we need to be able to share data amongst ourselves with our input provider and with our development, the people who will use actually our development. So it seems to me that agronomy is changing faster than agronomists. We tend to be a bit old school when it comes to data and data access. So we start to understand that data can be more than open or closed, to understand that there is an entire data spectrum in between. But if we are starting to understand what fair data means in theory, I think a lot of us are still struggling on how to put these principles in practice very concretely. So this is great initiatives from CABI and from partners from Ethiopia and Rwanda today to share some of their experience. I'm very eager to listen to them. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Fred. Okay, so next I'm going to call upon Dr. Lulseged from CIAT. He's a landscape ecologist with more than 15 years of experience on different themes, including land degradation, land restoration, sustainable land management, and sustainable intensification. So welcome, Lulseged. Are you there?
Hello, yeah, I'm there. Let me share my screen.
Shall I do it for you?
I don't think you have it there. The one you have is there. So I think I hope is there now? You can see. You can.
Yes,
you
we can.
We can see.
Okay. Thanks a lot, all. I will provide some of our experiences on data sharing and some example analytics that we did in Ethiopia the last few years. This is a collaborative exercise of many people in Ethiopia. Now we have a number of more than 100 who are partnering to share data analytics experiences and so on and so forth. So I am presenting on their behalf. GIZ is a prominent support donor, and GIZ gets the funding from Gates Foundation. Our key partners from the government side are EIR, the Research Institute, and the Ministry of Agriculture. So we, with no ado, you know that, sorry, let me put on. So we have, you know, data is crucial in many ways, and we know we make decisions based on data, and everyday activities of ours are based on data sets, not only in research, but in other day-to-day endeavors. So, there is no question that data and information is the basis to make informed decisions. And in Ethiopia, there is an effort to have this data to get digitalized and have a digital Ethiopia ready by 2025. And different efforts are undergoing, and we are trying to support those exercises. But in our case, we try to address the whole data value chain. We are not only interested to collect the data, but also to create database, to do analytics, improved analytics using modern technologies and development of agro-advisories for farmers through extension services. So there are, a lot of opportunities, developments in this respect. So we try to see all the chain, but one of the commonly missing elements is feedback from data users. So our effort is also to get feedback from those who are using the data, either government policymakers, development organizations, farmers, extension, or even researchers, so that we can update the whole value chain again. Maybe there are problems with data, gaps in analytics, or even the advisory service that we provide. So we try to address all this, and we start, of course, with data, analytics and advisory. So I try to show some examples. First, the driving force behind this our exercise is a huge amount of data has been collected since 1950s and from different sources for different projects and different initiatives. However, those data are not available in an organized manner. So they are scattered in different places, and even we don't know where they are or who owns, in what form, one template. So then we said, if we continue the same thing, then people will end up collecting the same kind of data from the same location for slightly different purposes, and that will be a lot of wastage of resources. So we said, why not we try to bring all these data sets together somehow, see what we have, what are the gaps, and then move to the next step. In most cases, our examples are on crop response to fertilizer, how much fertilizer applied when, or which type will bring which amount of yield was the first question. But now we also included some legacy data sets, and we're moving to other data sources from related to agriculture. So the question now is, where are those data sets? And is it possible to share data? We start asking different institutions, different partners, individuals, but it was not straightforward. So even that time, 3, 4, 5 years ago, data access, especially open data access, was not really commonly discussed. So it was just, if you ask data from offices, they may ask letters, or which letter, for what purpose, and it was not really easy. So we started bilateral discussions and also group meetings, and we decided that the only solution will be to find a way to bring those data sets from the different sources. And the entry point we found was to establish, or I don't know if you will call it establish, suddenly in one of our meetings, we said, why don't we organize ourselves in such a way that those people who have data and who are willing to share the data can form a certain coalition, and we call it coalition of the willing. So these are a group of people who wanted to contribute their data, the group, and also at least support the process in some way, in one form. So there can be individuals, there can be some organizations. Then the first step was, okay, we'll share data. Then we said how, on what, we cannot just say, okay, give this data to that, collect this data from this. We need a certain mechanism. And we developed a guideline, data sharing guideline for the coalition. So that means we have some processes and procedures and guidelines on how we share data. Mostly it is to acknowledge, to provide references, to publish together, to recognize whatever data we get from others. Then we said, okay, now we have a guideline, then let's bring the data sets. Those individually owned data sets can be gathered, no problem, because I can give to the task force. So the coalition has a task force of 7 people, and the coalition members are now more 104 or 5. So, but we said, what about the other data sets that we don't have among ourselves, but they are owned somewhere? And we struggle to find where they are. Some discussions where CABI and ODI colleagues were here to guide on how we can materialize that. So the first step was to identify and map data sources, mainly focusing on soil and agronomy. So we've published a document that says institution A has this kind of data set in this format with a detailed metadata, location, and so on and so forth. So we had a long table indicating who owns what kind of data and so on and so forth. And then that's helped us to move around and ask for data sets. And then when we start collecting those data sets, we observed that most of them are in analog format, an old report, a book, proceeding, and in some cases, they are not in good shape. The papers are thrown everywhere. Very old laptop, it doesn't work in a certain or in different formats, the storage mechanism, so on. So we learned the status and the conditions of the data sets. And we said, okay, in any form, let's start to bring those data sets. And we started with those which are easy to get and easy to collect, especially published in international journals, peer-reviewed. And we started to move around offices to collect those. So the focus was on crop response to fertilizer. And as you can see, we found a lot of data sets, very good ones, 15,000 points for wheat and maize also. For some crops, a little lower. For most of the crops, a bit higher. Then we also said collected soil profile data set, which is closer to 20,000 points on a soil profile, very well organized. And then we said, okay, we can produce from the left one, we are developing fertilizer recommendation. For the right one, we are trying to develop a soil profile atlas, including soil resource map, an improved result. Then we are not collecting only this crop and the fertilizer response or legacy, but also topography, climate-related data sets corresponding to those points. Because later, for prediction, we need to know the environmental and geomorphological climatic characteristics of the experimental locations so that we can be able to predict. Then we said, okay, from those data sets, these ones, as you can see, they're in different formats, in different sources, different conditions. So we faced a challenge of standardization because we brought those data sets and we started to provide trainings to write papers as an incentive for those people who provided the data sets. So there are around 2 weeks of training. Then it really took us a long time to organize the data sets to be used in an integrated manner. So we said, okay, that means there is a need for standards. So we have developed 6 different thematic areas, identified 6 thematic areas. We assigned senior agronomists or experts in the respective areas, and we organized a write shop to develop guidelines. So the first one is soil and agronomy, the second one soil biology, the third one is lab analysis, because the laboratory analysis also different ways, different mechanisms, different approaches, which really confuse analytics, and some of them are not clear, even in the reporting and so on and so forth. So these 3 are published and is already available, and we have 3 which are being developed. One is on soil classification approach, or another one is soil water management, and the fourth one is on integrated land resources management, and there is one which is cross-cutting. The cross-cutting one is a standard guideline that says any data to be collected should at least have A, B, C, D attributes. So that's it. So then the next one, okay, we start to share data among ourselves, but what about those who are not still member of the coalition? Then we said there is a need for a policy, a data sharing policy. So around last 2020, we worked with CABI and ODI, who supported developing a policy for data sharing, plus a guideline on how to implement the policy. So this document has been in the minister's hand for a longer time now, I think more than close to 2 years, more than 1.5 years or so. And this policy was presented in national workshop and then launched more or less but is not yet operationalized. First, they said they wanted some clarities, and that was done. Then into Amharic. Then recently, about 2 months ago, they called me and they said, this is very good, we can sign, but they asked why not we have, not why only soil and agronomy, why not others, water, livestock, breeding and resource, forest. Then they wanted to combine. Then our argument was, let's have this one first, enact it, let's use it, and then we learn from this and we move to the other components. So the new state minister has agreed on this proposal, and I hope this will be signed for utilization, because it's important to provide confidence, transparency, data sharing. Then, okay, after the data, we have an organized place to store the data set. So we have a Dataverse as the AR. Then we conducted different analytical approach or steps, which I don't need to go into details, with some machine learning algorithms to develop fertilizer recommendation. So this year, we're piloting on close to 400 farmers the decision support tools that we developed using the data sets I mentioned above. So we have advisories now on planting dates and the onset of the rains, the fertilizer amount and type application, and we trust early warning system. The we trust is not integrated into our system yet. This is a system developed by CIMMYT, CIR, and Oxford University. So we have to find a way to link. So anyway, this is an advisory we have, and we'll see how it works. We are working with Digital Green. So our demand partner for our exercise is Digital Green, because Digital Green have very well developed system to disseminate technologies and to collect feedback. So this is how we are operationalizing in 4 different regions. And last week, we conducted this exchange field day, which is very nice and doing very well. And now we are working with a big data team to automate the guidelines that we have so that we develop an application, because we have a challenge of using those guidelines, because when people feel they can make mistakes, they can jump a certain cell and so on. But if it's automated, then it will help us to control the entries and also the quality. Then we provided some trainings. Training was a key component in terms of workshops, right shops, or the national partners who publish many papers in the national journals. And now there are close to 10 papers which are being published under experimental agriculture through our support. So trainings and so on and so on, organizing special issue. Now the second phase of the project is there, and we have the coming 2 years. We are going to 3 years. The first year is almost finished. We are going to have a farmer research extension data linkage, which is which we GIZ and our partners CIMMYT, CIAT, and Desta developed together. And the objective is to transition the Datasets across and advisories across relevant value chains through working with extension system of the government. And this is being developed, and this will be very important, because data alone or new analytics alone will not be useful unless they reach to the end users. And because of these developments, we have a new project under the World Bank, which we call it ACRA, Accelerating Impact of CGI Research on Climate in Africa. And we are leading this exercise of building a big data hub that considers almost everything related to agriculture that we can offer to bring together to develop these systems and other applications, advisories, considering climate-informed advisories and climate-informed CSA package for mate with feed, forage, and small ruminants, where CIMMYT, ILRI, ICARDA, Alliance are the key CGR partners, with CCAPs coordinating the overall project. And these things have come, and we are, assigned to lead because of the experience we have earlier from the coalition exercise. So in general, we have big data sets that are being collected. We have organized data sets systematically. We have developed guidelines, and we have now a location-specific recommendation tool that is available, which will be piloted. We are testing now, and next season we will be piloting those advisories, and the data sharing implementation and its guideline, we hope will be available. So the ultimate goal is to develop a comprehensive agro-advisory system that considers climate, agronomy, soils, and other management practices in Ethiopia. So we moved a lot from trying to collect some data from few institutions to a very comprehensive system. And there is an overall agreement that in Ethiopia, we can work separately, but we use similar guidelines and ultimately come to a point to develop one fertilizer recommendation or one agro-advisory recommendation at a national scale, but also different for different locations, because this avoids confusion for our plan decision makers. So we have different actors, so many partners working with us. So these are few of them, because the national universities, research institutions, universities, and so on are so many. So sometimes we leave to mention a partner, sometimes we try to include some, because when we forget, we can have a problem. Anyway, these are the key partners, at least some of the major ones that are engaged in this exercise. I don't know if I have passed my 15 minutes. Thank you very much from my side. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Lulseged. You were just in time. Well done.
Okay.
Great. Okay, so yeah, just keep note of any questions you have, and happy for you to type them, and then we can come back to you and you can even ask them over the microphone if you want. So keep, yeah, just type. Okay, so next I'm going to call Reese. We've got Reese Manners from IITA. Reese Reese, we work closely with Reese. They are the coordinating partner for RASIS, and Reese is a scientist there. Reese, would you like to share your slides?
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Chico. Let me just try and get this to work, and just to check you can actually see the presentation and you don't see the presenter's view, you see the proper view, right?
It hasn't come yet.
Now?
Yes, yes.
Yes,
Cool.
the proper.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Fred, for the confirmation. Yeah, thanks everyone. So first of all, yeah, Chico and everyone at CABI, thanks for the opportunity to present this. So it's quite daunting to follow Lulseged's lead there with how far advanced things are in Ethiopia. But I think here in Rwanda, we're obviously at a very different stage within the kind of the process of, you know, data sharing and so forth, and developing a system that's obviously so far advanced in Ethiopia. So with that in mind, I think I'm just going to present a slightly different, provide a bit of a slightly different focus, more on, you know, where we are within the RASIS project, and also kind of considering some of the challenges and opportunities that we've faced so far in coming up to the first 2 years. No, excuse, yeah, finalizing the second year of the project, and really just looking at where kind of the work of, you know, CABI in terms of highlighting how we can go about developing, you know, a fair system here in Rwanda, and then moving on in terms of what's actually been identified as challenges and then the opportunities. So yeah, as Chico said, so my name is Reese Manners, I'm a scientist with IITA. So IITA are the partner coordinators of the RASIS project, and the project is actually led by the Rwandan government. So yeah, so RASIS is the Rwanda Soil Information Service, I think, so it's a sister project of Ethiosis. So basically it's looking to develop some soil and crop specific fertilizer and lime recommendations, to start mapping forms of erosion, and then ultimately develop a functional and interactive soil information service, which is, I think, is where, yeah, the partners in Ethiopia are already at. So as I said, it's led by the Rwandan government, so the Agriculture and Animal Resource Development Board, partnering with CABI, AFSIS, ISRIC, ECRAS, and ourselves in IITA. So the project, although it was officially agreed upon in 2019, activities didn't start until 2020, and it's going through until 2023 following a no-cost extension, which was approved last year. So yeah, I won't kind of go into the details of the project itself, more more looking at the data sharing and enabling environment, which is super important here in Rwanda. So kind of giving a bit of a background on the Rwanda system. So the Rwandan government is really pushing towards digitalizing a lot of activities and a lot of information to go online. And this is throughout all facets of Rwandan's culture. So to give you an idea, so Rwanda now, you pay your car fines online using your mobile phone. You can order, you can get prescriptions using your mobile phone. So the government here is really encouraging and really developing an enabling environment for kind of a more digitalized Rwanda, but also there may be some opportunities to kind of understand what that actually means in terms of kind of data sharing. So within RASIS, unfortunately, yeah, we were kind of hamstrung a little bit by COVID, as will everyone in this call. So this, I think, really restricted some of the activities of obviously CABI and everyone within the project in terms of really understanding what's going on here in Rwanda and really understanding the environment. So whereas I think CABI would have come and spoken to the key partners here in the country, and obviously the leaders of the project, RAB and other ministries, they were obviously restricted in terms of kind of developing that. So a lot of work was desk research based in terms of kind of webinars and workshops, interviews and surveys to kind of really move towards understanding what the current situation is here, and then moving towards the development of a suite of principles or guidelines or recommendations to really encourage not only internally within RAB in terms of kind of data sharing, but also within RASIS and also with partner ministries and then sub-ministries. So from these surveys and interactions and interviews with key stakeholders here in the country, what's actually been developed is in terms of a suite of proposed policy principles, which actually are aggregated or disaggregated under the 4 sections of FAIR, as Henry's already highlighted. So yeah, I think this is also very similar to what Lulseged was talking about. So the data sets here in Rwanda should be open and searchable. Data sets should have persistent identifiers. So really kind of we encourage that all data, not only within RASIS, but also we start moving towards a system where we start enabling that this is how all future data sets within not only RAB, but also other ministries actually start considering data. But also the data sets should be easily stored in agreed formats. So kind of what Lulseged was saying, that we move away from stuff being on floppy disks and CDs and hard drives, but it's also in a central repository. The data should be interoperable. The data set should be collected to an open and published standard where possible. Obviously, every country has its certain restrictions that I think we all have to respect. That there may be some data that can't be shared for the time being, and so should be embargoed for certain reasons. But also there should be an agreement on why such data can't be shared. And then in terms of reusable, so they can be shared with a clear license, that there can be published and open data wherever possible. So really kind of going back to what's actually been done in Ethiopia, that you can really, so you've got these legacy data, but they can then form the foundation of future research and then hopefully future kind of investments and so forth. So I think the example of Ethiopia really demonstrates the benefits of kind of adhering to these FAIR principles, not only in the present, but also in 10, 15, 20 years time, when we're not all looking for, those floppy disks that have, started rotting or something. So where are we kind of now at the moment? So in terms of moving away from the recommendations, we're now at the point where we've actually got a suite of data sharing guidelines. So after getting some feedback from very senior people within the Rwandan government, it was recommended that we don't start calling this a policy to start with, because that'll slow things down quite considerably. So if we start describing it as being a data sharing guideline, it means it's far less strong in the eyes of policymakers. So it's far more easy to kind of adopt it as being, or adopt these guidelines as being kind of gospel, and taking them on board and really building on them. Whereas kind of saying, okay, this is a policy, things get stuck in the getting things passed by Parliament, so it's far easier to do this. So actually at the point of actually having these data sharing guidelines, these guidelines are actually being reviewed by a committee So this committee is actually being developed across ministry, which I think is a really fantastic output, even if only that is an output of this of the work so far done. I think it really reinforces the great work which is being done by both RAB and CABI here to really push this, and really reinforces kind of the government buy-in that they see, okay, yes, data sharing is where we want to go. We recognize that there's some issues in terms of sharing agricultural and agronomic data, but like, look, we're putting this committee together. We're setting up a technical advisory team to support this, to really move beyond just kind of like the blah 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 and just like start enacting these, and hopefully start enacting these guidelines. So that's kind of where we are right now. So I think that's a really strong point of just after 2 years of the project. So what are the challenges we've really experienced so far in RASIS? So I think, yeah, a lack of in-country activities is really kind of really hampered things. So I think just kind of having that personal interaction and like really getting to know people on a personal level is fundamental for kind of, you know, helping people to understand FAIR principles, data sharing, the benefits of it. Because obviously you can have a back and forth, you can have trainings over Zoom or however. But if you can't put your hand up and just ask a question like, hey, I don't really understand that, that really kind of hampers like a co-learning environment. So that's something I think we've really, as a project, we've really been restricted by. But I think now as things start opening up, we can really start moving beyond that and start having these in-person meetings. So I think that would be, yeah, for GAIA as it goes forward as a project. I'd really recommend that. Just, you know, it's the fundamental nature of having these in-person meetings. Also, I think there's a certain challenge of, you know, having kind of like tangible outputs, which might be something like soil sampling in the setup of trials, versus maybe less tangible kind of activities like the development of guidelines. I think there are obviously considerable pressures internally within a project in terms of, you know, how you kind of implement activities. So also just kind of trying to find that balance between you know, going for those big numbers of kind of, you know, the soil sampling or setting up trials, what have you, versus kind of like, you know, really enacting kind of the longer kind of activities, those that take slightly longer and you may not see the immediate benefits for. I think that's something which is important to recognize. And also probably finally is just kind of encouraging institutional change. So I think we all know how slow institutions are to change in any country, not necessarily Rwanda or elsewhere, but just recognizing that something like, you know, enacting kind of FAIR principles internally within an institution like RAB or Minagri or the Ministry of Agriculture here in Rwanda is difficult, not only because it's quite a novel kind of idea, this idea, okay, yeah, all data should be widely open, because obviously as scientists, we're very precious about our data. Our data is our livelihoods, right? So just kind of really enforcing like the benefits of, you know, this co-sharing. And, you know, I think as been demonstrated there in Ethiopia, it's really powerful what you can do if you bring a coalition of the willing together, and this coalition comes together with their data sets. You can generate some amazing things and some really fantastic benefits further down the road. But it's just really kind of being maybe a little bit patient and just, you know, engaging partners to really demonstrate the benefits. So although I say this is a challenge, I think also this is a real strength of what we've done within the project so far, is that we've actually really brought these, so we brought the ministries together, and they're really on board with this now. So we're, you know, moving forward. So it's been a slow start, but now we've kind of reached that a turning point, and now things are moving really quickly. So that leads me nicely into kind of the opportunities that we see. So I think fundamentally, it's the vision that the government has for what RASIS is and actually could be. So I think it really kind of goes along the lines of what's going in Ethiopia. So I think RASIS could be and should be, if I can speak out of turn, should be the central hub for soil and other data sets within Rwanda. So everyone, once they start collecting data, like there should be an agreement with the SIS, whatever it's called, whether it's called RASIS or however it's named, that okay, these data will then be brought on board or be incorporated into RASIS, not at the end of the project, but during the project. Like it shouldn't just be okay, after 5 years, okay, now we submit the data. Also, another opportunity is, yeah, as I said, so government and senior management are really buying into RASIS. So I think that's a real credit to Jules, who's on this call, who's leading the RASIS project, to really start selling the benefits of data sharing and FAIR principles to not only internally with the Ministry of Agriculture, but externally. Also, there's a great opportunity of kind of changing the perceptions of data and like framework sustainability. So I think it's really important that we kind of see data as it should really be seen as kind of not an individual's property. It's, you know, it's a government property. It's, you know, it's a public good. So we need to kind of move towards that, as considering that in those factors, like what's the sustainability of kind of, you know, data being held on an individual hard drive. And that's a real opportunity. Like the government is really seeing that here. They're really pushing towards having these centralized repositories and hubs. So that's really fantastic. And yeah, I think the final one, I think this is something I really want to stress, is kind of not a third party, but a step back from kind of these activities, is just, yeah, the ownership that's being demonstrated from the government, and really how CABI is really pushed to kind of get this in cooperation with Jules and Charles Buchagu. So like, I think this is a fundamental thing. As soon as you kind of get the ownership and the buy-in from the senior partners or the senior the ministries, what have you, like things become super easy. So now we've kind of got that. I think things are going to fall into place really easily. And I think the benefit for a project like GAIA is you can kind of, you know, follow in RASIS's wake a little bit and take advantage of the experiences that have been learned from RASIS, and yeah, move forward. So finally, as I've got 30 seconds left, in terms of next steps. So yeah, looking to kind of actually engage with a wider body of stakeholders in RASIS to further co-develop the data sharing guidelines. So that's kind of what I was saying in terms of the committee, but this committee can actually be enlarged, or at least kind of engagement with non-committee members to actually have a more, stamp of approval from a wider body of stakeholders. Yeah, continued engagement with the steering committee to support approval and finally get the guidelines approved. And yeah, and I think fundamentally and finally is the sustainability of the SIS. So how can we start kind of planning for after RASIS? So I think that's a really cool question for Gates Foundation projects in general, right? Like once the money goes, like what happens? And I think that with Ethiosis is a really great example of, okay, once you've kind of had this kind of, you know, seed money to get things rolling, you can really, through a coalition of organizations, really have this really strong partnership to develop a really strong SIS and data sharing community for the benefit of Ethiopia in that example, and Rwanda in the future here in Rwanda. So I'm going to stop rambling now, and yeah, so thank you so much for the opportunity to present this, and yeah, I look forward to any questions at the end. So thanks, Chipo.
Great, thank you, Reese. That was great. Okay, so now we'll move on to question and answer. I'm going to open the floor. I don't see any questions that came through the chat. If you feel like you have got a question, just use the icon, the little hand icon to raise your hand. But I've got some questions. Can I get you, Lulseged, to answer this one for us? Can you tell us a bit more? We're really curious about this Coalition of the Willing. What was the trigger for developing it? And then secondly, how hard or easy was it to get that community to agree to, you know, to stand to the standards you had set, for example, in the guidelines?
Okay, thanks, Chipo. So, you know, the motivation behind the coalition is, as I tried to mention, and also as indicated in Rwanda's experience, is looking for a system and database so that we can benefit from these improved advanced analytical techniques that are available now. You know, you can do so many things. You can just find some even codes free from the internet, but there was no data. And then we continue repeating the same thing. When somebody doesn't get the data, they write a proposal and start to collect. And for us, that was wastage of time and even wastage of efforts. people can do something better through analyzing the existing data sets. So that was the reason that, and you know, we have a blanket recommendation. Still, there is some work by colleagues in some projects that are for specific areas or specific environments or farming systems. So we said we cannot continue with isolated advisories or the blanket recommendation, which is mostly available, and to bring a national but location-specific advisory with the data. And that was the reason, you know, how we started. Then the challenge, there is always a challenge. The challenge was, number one, this so-called free access, you know, access, the free, restricted, and unrestricted, and the debates, and the why and how. And then the coalition members, we started to define how we share the data sets. Then, even from the coalition members, there are a large number who still have not shared their data. So, you know, the people are still hesitating whether I give or not. And now, even in our survey, for about 42 or 43% only from all the institutions said they are really willing to share. Some percentage, they said they will share if they are formally requested. Some said, and the issue was they do not have clarity on policies and guidelines to share. So it's not an easy ride, and we have to struggle convincing different people, strategizing, and especially demonstrating examples. After we showed, you know, these examples of, you know, what we can do with large data sets, we invited international experts in a big workshop where they presented lots of experiences using data mining, artificial intelligence. Then people started to get interested. We also highlighted that we can provide trainings for those people who share their data sets. We can provide trainings in writing, not only analytics, but writing, get them published and so on. So that has opened the way. Still, there is a need for us to get the policy out so that we can still move to at least, you know, expand to some institutions which are a bit hesitant. And the excuse is they ask for a policy, and once the policy is out, maybe they can start to share. Just an information, after we presented this policy, where our CABI colleagues presented, the minister delegated a staff member, and he wrote an email to all agricultural experts to share their data, and no one responded. So, you know, those kind of, unless there is a clear policy, a clear effort to create awareness, you know, create those, some incentivize by doing something, you know, trainings, capacity buildings, publications, then they start to share, but still the policy will guide. So these are, you know, some of the experiences we have. Thanks from my side.
Thank you. Joel is asking, which data was mainly difficult to share? Joel Melio from Tari.
There is no such category in which this data, that data. What we needed was mostly an experimental data conducted to test the response of different crops for different fertilizer applications recommendations. So it was not about the data, it was about the personality. You know, some people are very distant. Some people may think we are going to exploit and say, you know, this data is wrong, that one is correct. And one of the approaches we followed is we code the data and we will not know. Few people will know only whose data was that. So if there is a problem, we try to print the data sets, or we try to reach to the people. And otherwise we will not say Mr. X data is this, Mr. Y is that, because that is also a norm that we plan to follow. So there is no as such, you know, restriction on which data is, but generally, I think the fertilizer recommendation is better shared compared to some location-specific and government in some border areas, some strategic locations. There is a guideline from the national security system, which forbids sharing data. But in some cases, for us, the soil data near something may not mean a lot, but we try to respect those. So the type of data may not be the problem, but the location of the data is sometimes a problem. This is not for individuals, but for some government organizations. I hope.
Thank you. I'll come to you, Reese, now. So these the guidelines you talked about, once they're approved, how do you see them being embedded into ways of working in Rwanda? Do you have anything any thoughts at the moment around that? And I see Jules has joined as well. Jules is actually the project manager for Rwasis. He's in the field, so not sure how good your connection is, Jules, but if you also had any thoughts about the guidelines, how you see them being embedded into ways of working after they are approved. Good to have you as well. Chime in, feed in.
Yeah, let me, I'll go ahead and answer whilst Jules is there. Yeah, I think it's probably, in terms of how I see it, once they do get approved, hopefully they kind of become kind of the basis for all new projects. I think kind of the grandfathering process into older projects might be a little more difficult and a little slower. But in terms of just kind of encouraging these guidelines of fair and data sharing to be, at the core of all new agronomy, agricultural projects, I think that's where I see it going. I think it's going to be, I don't think it's going to be a really quick process, but I think with the new, at least we can start working from newer projects and more, so projects like where there's an obvious benefit or use case for this is where I'd see it in the immediate future. But I think this is the trajectory of what's going on here in Rwanda. So I think it's inevitable that these guidelines or something similar will become policy. But it's just a case of let's not try and build Rome in a day sort of thing. I know that's possibly not what the answer you're looking for, but I think it's probably the most realistic answer. Chipo, Jules, I don't know whether you've got anything to add to that. Probably you're better placed to answer that question rather than I am. So.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, perfectly, Jules.
Okay, thank you very much. I think now the network is good. I'm on a tarmac road. We stopped somewhere, and I followed the presentation, a very good presentation from Ethiopia, and the experience of Ethiopia. I think the best one to learn from for the Rwandan case. Yeah, for data management, access of data, and the usability of data, we are working with CABI in the project of Rwasis, where, as you know, the Rwasis is aiming to develop site and crop-specific fertilizer recommendations, as well as proposing assessing the erosion control investment. But ultimately, we want to have a very good functional system, a special digital based where we'll be storing all those data and managing them. So the system needs to have some guidelines and rules that can lead the system. And we are really concerned about the FAIR principle guidelines. We want to have guidelines that can really follow the FAIR principle guidelines, as I said. We started, this is the second year, let me say like that, working with CABI. For Rwanda, which was also the same case from the background of Ethiopia, we have been working with a lot of projects, intervention, government and private. All those data are not even gathered somewhere. And from the report that has been presented by CABI team on data management landscape in Rwanda, they gathered all the information, how data are being managed and not available to people, can you be used by other people. In general, you cannot really tell people that the data in soil information and agronomic responses are located somewhere. They are generally in the computer of scientists or stored somewhere in the institution. But if someone wants to use them or want to have access on them, it's not easy to find a way and how we can find the data. That's really what we want to focus for the RASIS, not only for the data we are collecting for the moment in our project, but also the previous legacy information we have in the country. We have tried to collect them at the start of the project and share with the partners so that you can work on them and analyze them as getting a baseline of the project, but also they need to be stored in the RASIS system. Going to the aspect of data management and land data management guidelines, we are working closely with the Rwandan Ministry of Information through the institution called RISA, Rwanda Information Service, Rwanda Information Service Society, which is under the Ministry of ICT. Is really helping us to finalize the data management guidelines in collaboration with the CABI. CABI is helping us to develop the guidance. We are taking the guidance from the Ministry of Agriculture, but also the other stakeholders, including RISA. I think yesterday, but we had a very good discussion with RISA, where we explain them and give all detailed information, what we need, what we want. And they were very impressive to see that we want to do such things, and they wanted to help us to finalize the guideline and to see how it can be incorporated in the system. We up to date, we have a draft guideline that have been developed by CABI, which has to serve the system. But also we are planning to organize a detailed workshop in the coming by January probably, where we have to invite all in-country stakeholders to give feedback of the guideline on the guideline that have been developed by CABI, and discuss how the data will be managed by the system in the crisis, and to see what will be done, and how CABI can also improve from the recommendation of different stakeholders in the country, including RISA, Ministry of Information, Rwanda National Statistical Institute, and so on. So for the moment, we think that this guideline, this data sharing policy is very, we are waiting for it, and we need it for the success and the sustainability of the RASIS as a not only as a project, but as a system that will serve the country for the fertilizer and the lime and other soil management aspect on the demand of the country.
Thanks, Jules. Thanks for that overview. Good. Okay. We've come to right at the end, but there were a few other questions that we had. Let me just check the chat. Was there anything in the chat that I missed from any of the audience? The other ones were ours is CABI.
I did ask Chipo if Reese had any thoughts on who might do the encouragement of engaging with the guidelines for new projects. I know Reese talked about, encouragement, but I'm just curious if he has any thoughts on who might lead or be responsible for that.
Yeah, nice question, Tom. So I'd say it's probably that's the role of the committee, right? And kind of the recognition this committee should have, hopefully, within the government, and also it's the teams that are kind of supporting to that. So hopefully then, because there's some pretty senior people within this committee that can really start kind of moving things and having discussions with the people that need to be discussed with and so forth. Because I think here in Rwanda it is very much kind of a hierarchical process that these things need to go up and then they'll come back down. So yeah, we're in the upward phase. I know that sounds like a stupid thing to say, but that's how it is here. So yeah, I think that encourage that from new projects is that the committee will have to kind of speak with the minister or hopefully to kind of sell this, and then that becomes okay from all new projects that are to do with agronomy or agriculture will then have to be under these guidelines. And I think ultimately where RISE should be going is that the next step should be okay that these guidelines also kind of state that all the data should then go into the SIS of RISE. But I think that's probably a discussion for another day, but I think that would kind of make sense having that. I think that it already is in the guidelines, but it should be there. So that's a long way of saying the committee. So
that's great. Thank you, Reese.
Yeah.
Yes. Great. Okay, so we've come to the end of the webinar. We just want to wrap up and give a summary of what we've picked up from what we've heard from each of the cases as being key important factors to encouraging and enabling environment for soil and agronomy data sharing. My colleague Mike Rose, we worked together. He's been part of all these projects, very instrumental on data strategy. So could you just wrap up for us and give us a summary, Mike?
I'll do my best, Chipo. So I've just shared my screen. So the sort of 5 kind of key things that have come out of the conversation today. So firstly, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's contributed. I think that was really useful and really interesting. So the 5 things. So I think it shows, and the example from Ethiopia and the work that's been happening in Rwanda recently shows the importance of having this kind of supportive and engaged community that work together to help embed any transition or any change that we're trying to make around data and data sharing. The second one sort of linked to that is it's really important to have government and in-country buy-in to make sure that whatever's happening is sustainable. There's a myriad of donor projects that happen, and donors are quite good at having policies around data sharing and open data, but actually the government and the in-country actors need to understand, believe, and be part of the decision making around how data gets shared for it to actually happen and for it to continue once a project closes. It's really important to sort of think about what the problems are and what the issues are around data sharing before you dive straight into building solutions. So actually, I think as shown by Lulseged, there's lots of effort that's gone into sort of getting everybody onto the same page. And it's only after getting everybody onto the same page around data sharing, you can start to build the kind of new tools and new interventions and start sharing data and information in a positive way. The next one, this takes time. Building that kind of that cohesive group and having those conversations and getting agreement takes time. It looks, one of the questions that was asked of Lulseged is like, what data is difficult to share? And it's quite clear that although there's lots of people in the coalition who are willing, not everybody's sharing data yet, and that activity has been going on for a few years. So it's just realizing that actually this is not a one-shot thing. It does take time and effort. And then the final one, I think it's clear from this webinar and the conversations that have been had, there's so much we can learn from each other across the different projects. Whilst we might be working on different thematic areas or slightly different issues in different environments, actually, we're talking about the same kind of problems. So actually, there's lots that we can learn from each other, and we should definitely do more of this and talk more across the different projects. Back to you, Chipo.
Great. Thank you, Mike, for that summary. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you, everybody, for joining this webinar. It's going to be a series. As we learn more from GAIA in Tanzania, we will have other webinars where we share findings now that are coming out of GAIA. So we continue, like Mike says, to share and cross-learn and all of that. So yeah, I wish you all a good rest of the day. And we will be in touch with you, particularly our colleagues in Tanzania. We will be calling and sending emails and asking for collaboration and more information. Yeah, that's it from me.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.